Tal, you have spent more time than anyone I know figuring out how to use AI to help PMs. So where should we start?
A really good place to start is analyzing qualitative survey results. And it's really tempting to summarize or aggregate, but it's actually really counterintuitive how you should do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload, these are real App Store reviews publicly available online for, let's use AliExpress. I'm going to upload the CSV. And this, by the way, is into my Copilot for Riverside. As a PM, I created a Claude project and I put a lot of context in here. And I put like a custom instructions, and I'm going to let the CSV load, and I am going to ask it to analyze that CSV. I'm going to say with App Store reviews, but I'm not going to ask it for a summary. I'm going to ask it for specific examples. So I want to say, create a document with patterns, themes, and insights. Illustrate each point with 5 exact quotes, and basically give me a bunch of examples, but like tell me how many responses support that point. So because it's App Store reviews, there's rating scores. And I'm also going to ask it for outliers, right? So it's going to like create these like really cool clusters, and AI is really good at that. But then I want to challenge it. I'm going to wrestle with it and be like, great, what didn't you include? Okay. And I'm going to ask it for some statistics, and I'm going to leave some wildcards here. Like, just tell me anything else you see. So let's see. This is for AliExpress. And I'm going to send it. Now, the cool thing about AI interacting with data is we know that it's not great at putting all the like data rows in the context window, but it's really good at writing code that can run on the data. And that's what it's doing right now. So this is how AI interacts with the world. It writes code that interacts with the world, which is really, really cool.
Has Claude released how big its context window is? Do we have an idea?
Yeah, it depends on the model. I always like forget the amounts, but they're all publicly available. The gotcha here is even if the context window is a certain amount, it doesn't necessarily indicate that everything in the context window is going to be addressed. It like has like a memory drop off, and there's some benchmarks that have come out recently showing. So if you tend to use like exactly the same word as all the things you put in the context window, it actually has a really good recall. So you actually get more of the context window. But if you're like conceptually referring to it with synonyms and things like that, there's actually a much smaller context. So it's really nice. Okay, this is some basic data statistics, right? You could do this in Excel as well. But here's where it gets really interesting. All right, so it's going to talk about complaints that people have about app performance, right? And if you ask it just to summarize, if you don't ask it for exact quotes, it's going to stop here. And you kind of like have this blurry, summarized view of reality, like a CEO that never gets in the trenches. But, right, because we asked it for exact quotes, you get the real words by real people, right? And you can check this. You can go search this back in the CSV, right? And this is a totally different world, right? Like this is so much more insights when you say restricted for suspicious activity. The search gets worse. Things like popping up. So that's a way more sharper like image of reality when you get exact quotes like this. You can keep going like this, and let's see. But then the cool thing is it kind of came up with its own clusters. But then we're saying, well, just because it came up with like really nice clusters, it might feel really satisfying, but you got to stay really skeptical, and you want to say, okay, well, what didn't you include in the clusters? And again, here's some more exact quotes. So this is a really great way to get the best of AI without getting all the downsides of.
This episode is brought to you by WorkOS. If you're building a SaaS app, at some point your customers will start asking for enterprise features like SAML authentication and SCIM provisioning. That's where WorkOS comes in, making it fast and painless to add enterprise features to your app. Their APIs are easy to understand so that you can ship quickly and get back to building other features. Today, hundreds of companies are already powered by WorkOS, including ones you probably know like Vercel, Webflow, and Loom. WorkOS also recently acquired Warrant, the fine-grained authorization service. Warrant's product is based on a groundbreaking authorization system called Zanzibar, which was originally designed for Google to power Google Docs and YouTube. This enables fast authorization checks at enormous scale while maintaining a flexible model that can be adapted to even the most complex use cases. If you're currently looking to build role-based access control or other enterprise features like single sign-on SCIM or user management, you should consider WorkOS. It's a drop-in replacement for Auth0 and supports up to 1 million monthly active users for free. Check it out at workos.com/Aakash to learn more. That's workos.com/Aakash. If you're enjoying this podcast episode with Tal, you'll love his course on Maven, today's podcast sponsor. The problem with most courses online, like Udemy, is there's no live component, and the instructors aren't experts in their fields, they're professors. At Maven, you get direct live access to experts and operators from the world's best tech companies. You can't get that access anywhere else, in any university, and you usually can't find them on YouTube either. I've featured so many of Maven's experts in the newsletter and podcast for that reason. To help you out, I've put together a collection of courses I recommend at maven.com/x/Aakash. This includes courses like AI prototyping for PMs, product sense for PMs, and getting an AI PM certification. Visit it now at maven.com/x/AAKASH.
Right. The best of AI is like, take this massive thing and help me roam and navigate and traverse it. But you don't want to go so far to lose sight of like the real words, the real, frustrations, the emotions, the capital letters people are using, things like that. Really important to have that.
Yeah, and especially when the volume of feedback is very high. This feels like something that might have taken you, even just to calculate those Excel statistics at the top, 15, 20 minutes, and then to read and summarize all these, maybe another 30, 45 minutes. We're talking about a 1 hour work session that's essentially taken us 2 to 3 minutes here.
Right. And then what you could do, right? If the alternative, let's say you're a very diligent PM and you're like, well, I read every single App Store review. Great. Right. You can now use this to zoom in and say, okay, hey, can you make me a CSV with everything in this category or all the 1-star reviews or everything that's people are complaining about split screen? Let's say this is an initiative we have coming up and I want to include those in the kickoff. Great. You can still read every single App Store review, right? You don't have to give that up.
And in terms of the project that you place this in, we saw the prompt. What type of context did you put in to make this project so effective?
Yeah. So the cool thing about projects, and this is in Gemini, it's called gems. In ChatGPT, it's also called projects. The idea is that it's a bunch of context that gets started in every thread that you have. So if you were just to use, open up ChatGPT one morning or Claude one morning and just start typing in a chat, it starts from zero context. Maybe it has a little bit of memory about you, but nothing serious. If you've created a project and you've put into that for a product manager, it might be, hey, what's the vision of the company? Who's your target customer? You can get personal and say, who's on my team? You can say, what were my last performance reviews, right? And so on and so forth. Basically, you could start with asking yourself, what would you give a new product manager that just joined your company? Like before they even have a team, what document would you have them sit down and read, right? Just start with that. Like that should be, put that in the context because using LLMs without a lot of context, you've probably heard the expression, you're just going to get the average of the internet. And so there's all this like latent power you're not getting. But the moment you give a little bit of context, right, a little bit more context, you are basically turning, you're like focusing all the power of the LM to this like laser through that context. And then you get way more than the average of the internet. That's where it gets really powerful.
So what's our next use case of AI for PMs?
So one thing that I constantly wish I had more of my manager's time to help me with is I just need another pair of eyes on my crazy calendar to just like look at it from the side and just give me an audit, just give me like a fresh view of it. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm inside the project. So it has all this context on me, including things like feedback I've gotten in the past from my manager, my performance reviews, 360 reviews, things that I have told my Copilot that I need to work on, right? Things like that. Things like, oh, you don't make enough time for just spending one-on-one with the designer in that phase. And I'm going to upload a bunch of screenshots of my calendar so that they look like this. Let's see, the one without the arrows. There we go. So I'm just going to upload a bunch of these, just like random samples. And I'm going to say, hey, I have attached screenshots of my calendar. What observation insights do you notice? What do you see here? And of course, it's always a really good tip when you use AI, like give me exact quotes, give me specific examples, right? Illustrate what you're saying. Because otherwise LLMs tend to just kind of stay really high level, which feels good, but then backfires long term. All right. So these are some cool vanity stats. There's like half my work week. What? Okay. Uh, frequent topic switching, um, multiple interactions in a single day, limited deep work time. Oh shit. um, right. And you can also, if you really want to be really rigorous here, you can tell the AI, hey, before you analyze my calendar, I want you to go like ask me about anything that you don't know what it means. So some meeting titles might not be clear to people who don't have context on the company. So ask me what they are and then go ahead and do this. You can go even crazier and say, I want you to visualize it. So I'm going to go back and just change this prompt and say, here's screenshots of my calendar and go over these weeks and tell me about every single calendar event, right? Categorize each event. If it's unclear, ask me what they are and just, summarize it for me. Here's some examples just to help understand Riverside and the context there. So let's see. At the end, what we're going to do is we're going to say, great, now you like created this like raw data, you categorized everything. It's kind of like QuickBooks for my time. Create a pie chart, right? Tell me about trends. Then like, yeah, I can have a field day with visualizing, like, yeah, just making it like HTML, CSS charts. And then you can really just have this like very visceral understanding of like, oh, holy crap, I'm spending a lot of time here and I should be spending time here, but that's like a really small slice of the pie chart. You can take that to your manager and say, hey, we need to go over these stats of my time, right? Some of you have like mixed panel and amplitude for how you spend your days. So that wasn't possible before LLMs.
I wonder if there's a way to give it like the description of the events and the attendees and those types of data points as well.
That's a really cool idea. I bet with something like Zapier or similar kind of tools, you can even connect it to your Google account. I haven't tried that. That's a really cool idea.
Or that's a startup idea for somebody.
Or a startup idea. Yeah.
Integrate with your Google Calendar, basically ask for your Google Calendar permission, and then download more than just the title to optimize people's calendars.
Yeah. I mean, anybody hearing this, I think anytime a workflow with AI gets a little complicated, but still very similar for everybody, involved in a target market, like that's a startup.
Yeah. And everybody's always worried about building these wrappers, but I like what Aravind Srinivas said, which is like the LLM models are wrappers on top of NVIDIA. NVIDIA is a wrapper on top of TSMC. Everything is a wrapper at some point.
Yeah. I mean, anytime I hear somebody use the term, oh, it's just a wrapper, I'm like, great, one less person that's going to compete with me, right? On this idea. Cool. You keep saying that. I mean, just think of how many SaaS products we use that could be done in Google Sheets, right? Or probably a lot of people still use Google Sheets for instead of Jira, but Jira is a company.
Yeah.
You can think of the same with Craigslist, right, for a lot of consumer things as well. And so here's like some insights. Nice. And then I'll say, create a pie chart, right? So again, nothing special here, just like natural language. Create a pie chart. Um, like give me some like inference and insights.
When do you prefer to edit the prompt versus just continue the conversation below?
It's a good question. If you don't like the response and don't want to keep working with that, go edit the prompt, right? Like it's basically an opportunity to rewind and redo. If you're like, that's cool, let's use that and let's build on top of that and continue the chat. That's the best way to think.
I used to rarely edit prompts, but I think I'm going to start editing them more.
I think that's the most important feature of ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini is the edit pencil icon. That is, um, I think that's like all of prompt engineering, that pencil icon, because you don't really need to know the best practices or the latest like academic papers on what prompts work. You just need to be able to type something in, look at the result, apply your taste, say, did it do what I wanted? If not, like a person, what context was it missing? Let me go back, edit the prompt, add another sentence of context. Did it do something I didn't like? Right? Then I'll go back, edit the prompt, add another sentence. Don't do this thing. Right? Do that a few times. You're going to get really close to what you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So here we go. A little
Right.
messy. I think it's because we're really zoomed in for screen share, but this is, there we go. Here's a concern, recommendations, almost a slide, and it made it interactive. So a little out of order, a little weird, but pretty impressive, right? This is something that I can then export as a CSV. I can say, hey, give me that data back. I can save this for my next one-on-one with my manager and go over it, right? And we still have the raw data. We still have the calendar screenshots as well to really understand what is it talking about.
All right, let's move on to our next use case.
All right. So I want to give credit to Alan in my community for this really cool idea. I think one of the challenges as a product manager is just keeping up with new technologies, being able to intelligently hold your own, at least to know what questions to ask. You don't have to be an expert, but some of these concepts are, they're popping up all the time. So for me, one thing that I really need help with is learning the concept of RAG, right? Retrieval Augmented Generation. That's like something that I think is more art than science, but very technical. And so I want the AI
For
to
people
teach
who
me.
don't know, why should they care about this, RAG?
Oh, okay. So this is a concept that's used often in a lot of AI products and AI applications. It's when you have way more data that can fit in a context window. How do you still let the AI work? So, for example, something like custom GPT is actually, this is how they work. That's why you can upload so many files to a custom GPT. Um, or, for example, like Notion AI is another example, right? Like they don't want you to have to limit how many documents you can traverse, but they also can't fit, a company's entire knowledge base into one context. So RAG is a technical concept that solves that. But right now, I don't know what that means. I've heard that thrown around in the hallway, but I need to understand. So I figured, okay, I know what the acronym means, and you can basically adapt this to your learning style. So for me, I want you to teach me the concept like I am 5-year old and ask me questions. So it's like interactive. Now the cool thing is, it's inside again the Riverside PM Copilot, so it's going to use Riverside when it can, and relate it to my job. So this is cool, right? It's like explaining it super simply. This is and it's adapting it to Riverside's vision, right? Um, think of this as you found that perfect blog post that explains this concept just for you in your style, but without having to Google. So if I have to go retrieve some data without a helper, I'd have to answer from memory. With RAG, I get a special helper, kind of like an expert librarian or a paralegal. Anyway, so it's then saying, okay, well, it's not over. It's not just read this as a blog post. It's asking me to engage. So why am I answering a question using only your memory? Something's not enough. I might forget details. This is actually the answer. Let's see what it has to say. All right. So I've created a little teacher for something that's pretty complicated, but finally, oftentimes engineers on your team, when you ask them to explain something, they might mean really well, but they might make you more confused. So it's really helpful to do this ahead of time and study up.
All right, let's move on to our next use case. Should I run an A/B test?
One of the biggest questions as a PM is like really high stakes for your team, but also like a really difficult thing to explain to stakeholders is why you are or are not running an A/B test for something, right? And it always sounds like really good uh, as some for somebody in marketing or sales or CEO to be like, well, why don't you just run it as an A/B test? So, um, and it's never a good look to be to explain like, hey, rationally, this like logically, it's a bad decision to run this with an A/B test. Um, you can do this, by the way, for any framework, any decision framework you find online. It really helps sometimes to like say, hey, I did this with AI, and it like gives it a little bit more rigor, just like inviting an external, third party consultant. So um, a long time ago, I wrote a blog post on like what is the decision tree for running an A/B test. I took that blog post. I At the time I put it into AI and I was like, hey, can you convert this into like Markdown? Can you convert this into like a text version decision tree? Um, and then I said, great. I'm trying to decide whether a change that I want to make in the product should be run as an A/B test. So um, let's come up with a feature. Akash, what would be like a feature you'd really want to see in Riverside?
Thumbnails for podcasts on YouTube.
So like automatically generated thumbnails for podcasts on YouTube.
Yep.
Cool. Let's we'll throw in the term AI in there. Um, so the rest here is I didn't write this. I mean, I wrote the blog post, but I used AI to just like convert the blog post to a decision tree. So let's just run it. So this is like a really cool way to apply critical thinking, right? Um, and it also really saves a lot of time in like, articulating a really difficult, really complex decision like A/B testing. What's cool is it's first of all asking me a few questions. Um, da, 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 and let's say, okay, do we need precise quantification of the change? We don't. Uh, there's we don't, and two, there's not a lot of downside. Akash, would you agree? Like, even if the feature wasn't super effective, um, it wouldn't like set you back as a creator on Riverside.
Yeah, mainly just like a little bit of brand downside, right? Like if
Mhm.
you generate something for somebody and they don't like it, they may just abandon the platform, especially as a new user.
Okay, so there's a downside. It could make bad, or say like bad outputs could make bad impression on the entire platform. Maybe you'd like wonder if other features were working properly. Right. Don't necessarily revenue. So on one hand, we don't need to know exactly how much money this made or it affected conversion, but we do need to make sure it's not like ruining people's impression of the product. I ignored the other questions. It'll be just fine. Okay. So now it's walking me through its thinking. Um, I answered yes here. Let's move to the secondary requirements. It's cool. It's kind of facilitating me, um, like Socratically. Oftentimes, if you are doing this in a thread where you've been talking about this feature for a while, like, hey, we this user research, help me write a PRD, things like that, it won't ask you this many questions. Um, and let me just try something like take a guess at all of the questions. So it's kind of doing a PRD, a small PRD here. And then it'll make a recommendation, which is don't do an A/B test, but make it an opt-in feature. And you can
Oh,
keep going, right?
interesting.
One thing you can do is like, okay, that's cool, but play devil's advocate. And I want you to argue the opposite. Right? You can keep going with this and make it a conversation. At the end of the day, as a PM, you're kind of like observing your team debate each other and like getting informed by all sides of the debate, and you can make a judgment call. But this really helps save a lot of time, a lot of like brain cells, right? Like you have a whole team discussing this really difficult topic with you.
Awesome. Let's move on to our next use case, reverse simulating a hard conversation.
Everybody listening to this has had to have a conversation that they were not excited about. Could be with somebody on their team, right? About some friction or missed expectations, maybe with a stakeholder on how to better work together or what's not working. And it's really nerve wracking. I know for me, right? It's something I try to put off, but I know it needs to happen. And AI is a really good way to practice for it. But even better, right? You could use AI to simulate what it's like to talk to the other person. Um, but another thing you can do is flip it. You can have the AI be you and you be, let's say, the stakeholder. So um, it's a matter of giving context. So just tell the AI um, what happened the way if you were like really stressed about it and sitting with a friend over a beer. So let's see. Um, I'm really nervous about having a conversation with my product marketing manager about how we're not really, um, let's see, we're really dropping the ball on rollout plans and just clarity on who's getting what feature when and what collateral is going with that and the clarity around that to the rest of the company. So I merged a bunch of hard conversations into like one. So I'm going to say, I'm really nervous about a conversation to have with my product marketing partner about how we need to better communicate the rollout company. I've been clear in the past about the workflow, but it doesn't seem to happen, right? And I'm leaving this ambiguous. Could be the problem is me here, but and I will play. I'll play Joe, my product market manager. Okay, so we're asking the AI to play me, and all right, so this is I'm already feeling this like empathy. This is me, and I'm Joe. So I'm reading this. Hey, Joe, thanks for making the time. I know we've been juggling a lot. What's your take on how it's been going? Where do you think we're getting stuck? I'm already feeling feelings reading this. I already can I'm like, oh, okay, that's what it's probably like to hear this. And I'm also noticing, um, you know, some really good sentences that are really helping me, uh, I guess, um, be more open to this kind of conversation. And it's talking about impact, right? So I'm noticing what I could be doing. And if the AI doesn't do a good job, you can notice what doesn't work either. But this is like a really cool way to understand what it's like to be the person you're going to be talking with. Right? I can say, I think it's going great. I'm going to be really extreme here. So you can keep going on this. You can do this for, um, you know, really tough. I've done this for like really tough stakeholder situations. You can do this for personal life. You can do this for product interviews. So Ben Arias, another instructor on Maven, I think also on your list, does a really cool job with this and a really specialized, really focused way for FANG interviews. And yeah, it's hard to explain like the feeling you get when even in make believe land, you have to put the other person's hat on. But it's really, really powerful. And I don't think this was something that's possible before LLMs.
Today's episode is brought to you by Gibson AI, the future of backend development. Imagine designing, deploying, and scaling your database as effortlessly as having a conversation. With Gibson AI, that's now a reality. Gibson AI is your AI-powered database engineer. In just minutes, you can chat with Gibson to create production-grade data models, deploy them on Gibson's cloud infrastructure, and instantly generate secure REST APIs. Connect your frontend directly to your Gibson-built database, or drop the API specs into Cursor, vZero, or Bolt to build a full-stack application seamlessly. From idea stage to millions of users, Gibson scales with you. Gibson optimizes your database as you grow and enables easy schema updates and migrations. So head over to gibsonai.com/Aakash. That's GIBSONAI.com/AAKASH to sign up for free and experience the future of automated data modeling. Yeah, and I also feel like it's giving us a lot of good sentences about how to deal with this, like you can kind of simulate the worst case scenario here. They think everything's going well, and then you can see like some sentences or some crutch phrases you can use so you're not at a loss for words when it comes time for that discussion.
Exactly. You can create your like Notion document, preparing for one-on-one and like use, copy and paste some of these like sentences you really like. And I want to point out, it's using somebody named Abo. Abo is a real person. He's actually the head of marketing at Riverside. Jonathan is actually the head of sales, right? How does it know that? Well, because it has context on the org chart that I gave Riverside PM Copilot.
All right. So I think this about wraps up the importance of building out a PM Copilot with the right context in Claude and then occasionally dipping out into tools like ChatGPT or Perplexity to build your PM AI Copilot. Now I want to move into broader ways that PMs can work unfairly in this unfair role that we have. And the first one, and I love this suggestion of you, and I probably only started doing it in the last 2 years of my 16-year career, but I saw a huge ROI to, which is demoing the idea of doing meeting next steps live. So let's say we're in a product review, and just for roles, we'll say you were the senior ICPM building this feature we've been talking about a little bit, which is YouTube thumbnails for podcast creators on Riverside. And you were the PM, you just led the product review. There were some designers, some engineers, there were a couple product leaders, and yourself really driving the conversation. So where do you take it from here?
So one thing I really recommend, if you're a PM and you're in a meeting, ask yourself, how can I be screen sharing right now, right? Um, you should be screen sharing. It could be the description of a Jira ticket. It can be the update you're going to write, whatever the follow-up task that's probably going to fall on you. Start screen sharing that in that software during the meeting. Now that maybe sounds counterintuitive because your stakeholders might fear that your stakeholders might feel that, you know, you are you're not doing your job or that you're wasting their time. You should be doing this on your own time. It's actually the opposite. And it's actually a really good way of playing back in real time what's going on. It's a really good way of um, showing that you are really diligent about action items and making sure that they're on paper, right? It gives everybody this peace of mind to see. You don't have to finish the artifact in the meeting. You can get 80% of the way there. So, Akash, let's say we just had a sync on a project that we're really trying to ship. And you and I are on a team together. And we just had a meeting, or we're just having a meeting right now on what is like the status of this project. Okay, so we're just going to pretend for this that we have some of your recent podcast guests also in this meeting. And let's see, this is the last time that we had this meeting. I took that from the Slack channel and I've pasted it back into uh, the Slack message. And now we're going to update it. So already it's like an automatic agenda. And Akash, as the engineering manager, um, we really, really just want to get it out to like a really small group. We don't have to finish everything, right? We always said like the first release will be the like product partners, like WhatsApp group, the design partners. Um, so Akash, like for the simulation, give me like the worst news possible about that bad bug where the recordings are disappearing.
Yeah, it turns out a lot of people are running into this issue where they do a 90-minute, 120-minute recording and there's some sort of stuttering or something, and we're not telling them about it. And so when they go check the recording afterwards, there's a stuttering and they can't use the episode.
Okay, so actually the recordings are not disappearing and the stuttering. And with your engineering hat on, where does this stand? Any progress there?
It's going to be almost impossible for us as Riverside to do anything because it has to do with the guest's camera, actually, their hardware. And so, probably if we were to build something, we would build like sort of a live frame rate screen, for instance, for the host, for them to understand how many frames they're getting. Or alternatively, we could simplify that a little bit and give them a little less control and say, okay, if you've selected 24 frames and you're not getting 24 frames, let's put up a red warning light immediately, or let's put up some sort of indicator. Or we have like a built in pop up that we use for error messages already. For instance, when we don't have browser screen sharing permission. So we could just reuse that modal and put up like your guest video may have stuttering issues.
Awesome. And I think, like you said, most of what you mentioned is not a risk or like a thing we're wondering about, except one part, which is like the frame rate detector. So we don't know if that's technically something we can do reliably. So it looks like the next step here would be like just a proof of concept, right, of the frame rate detector. And then we don't even need to do the warning. So that's like the next step. I'll just shorten this. And Akash, as the most experienced technical member of the team, um, I'll say that this is something that you will lead just because it's so high stakes right now and goes so deep into the code.
Okay.
All right, and we can keep going. We'll go like line by line. Um, the idea is like that we are both um, like we're having the meeting, recording the notes of the meeting, and we're creating the summary that'll go back out for people who, are very in tune to this project, but aren't doesn't make sense for them to be in the meeting. Um, so yeah, Akash, what was this like for you as you were talking and you were watching me type?
It was good. I feel like the only risk potentially is if you record kind of the whole 30-minute meeting. I might feel like you're almost like having this meeting to share with others versus having this meeting to productively move forward with me. So should people be doing this the whole meeting or just at the end?
That's a really good point. Um, it could be at the end of each idea, right? Like say, okay, cool, we just had a really good discussion on what the next step is. Let me just like write a few notes down. I'll polish it later.
Yep, makes
Right.
sense.
The key is to ask yourself, how do I have people feel heard and that like what they said is recorded, but without the other feeling that you gave, right? Which is like, hey, are you paying attention? Why is there so much typing noise? Right. All that stuff. You want to find that really good balance between.
Yep. So let's move into our next sort of hack here, which is doing looms. I want to understand, as a PM, when should I actually be recording a loom? What are some real use cases? And then let's go ahead and see what that looks like.
Or let's say there's like a discussion in Slack and somebody's like, well, this is like really complicated. Let's do a meeting. So even in that situation, right, where you're like, oh, geez, another 30-minute meeting. Like, I wish we could have like figured this out in the thread. Even in that situation, most of that meeting, most PM meetings are the product manager for most of the time giving context to the people in the meeting, right? And then that might be enough, and it might be like, oh, I get it now, or there might be like 5-10 minutes of back and forth discussion. But most of that is kind of one way, right? Explaining kind of what's been going on or what's new, what needs to be known. And for that part, a Loom is really, really ideal. And then at best, you can avoid that meeting entirely. And even at worst, you can cut down that meeting. All right. So let's say that I'm a growth product manager at Riverside. And I found that there's a really strong hypothesis that if we give people a lot more clarity on what plan they're currently on at the marketing page like level, that we're going to be able to drive a lot more upgrades. But right now, it's not reflecting that because it's like a different technical stack. So um, I in Slack and discussions, we're like, oh my God, we really need to meet with the marketing developer team about this. I have some of my engineers, some of their engineers, and we'll figure out how to like make them all work together. But so much of that meeting uh, is one way, and I can totally just like give that context now. I already sat with my engineers. I know, what the intro is. So I'm gonna open Loom, and I guess just because we're recording a podcast, I'm just maybe not mess with the camera, but like I can have myself in the corner, which makes it like very human and very personal. Um, and I'll start recording. I'm not going to do it now just because we're using Riverside, and I'm going to aim for less than a minute. I'm not going to do 5 minutes, not 9 minutes. Aim for less than a minute. Um, and I might hit like 2 minutes, right? Because I like stutter around and I wasn't sure what I was going to say. So I'll throw that recording out and I'll do it again and try to hit 1 minute. Um, all that time that I would invest is still going to be less than the amount of time it would take me to do that in the meeting. So let's say I hit start recording in Loom, right? And I'll watch the clock here. Hey, marketing team. So in preparation for our meeting, what I want to do is kind of give you the high level of the flow of how the marketing page continues into the product. And I want to show you some of the technical details behind the scenes. So you can start thinking about this and let this marinate ahead. So if I click buy now on the pro plan from the marketing site, right, you'll notice that there's like a plan ID here at the top. And that's only like part of the picture. There's actually a bunch of parameters that get passed as cookies that we didn't want to show in the URL. And right, and so on and so forth. And I would watch the clock. I'd be like, okay, that was like long-winded. If it's like 2 minutes, right? People aren't gonna like they're gonna see like, oh, this is 2 minutes. They're gonna put it on their to-do list. But if it's like 54 seconds, right? Way more people in the meeting are gonna hit play, and you can have a much shorter meeting instead of having to explain all this stuff and get right to the good stuff of the brainstorm.
Yeah, I think that's the key, making it less than a minute because then in sort of the getting things done mentality, you just get it done now instead of putting it on a list.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So the next technique you've talked about, which I think is really powerful, is to hide, ignore, or automate Slack. So how do people do that?
So I'm going to use the Lenny Slack just because it's like especially overwhelming. But I think anybody watching this can like really relate to opening up Slack and just having that like mini heart attack, right? All these like unreads. So here's a few things that can really make that overwhelm a lot more manageable. The first thing everybody should do, I wish this was default in Slack, is go to settings, click on home, and show unreads only. So every time that you go into a channel and you've read it, it won't be in the sidebar anymore. Right? It's just like cognitively a lot easier to deal with. So here's an example. Right? Let's say I went to the general channel, I read everything, and I go to Talk AI. The general channel disappears. Right? It's like crossing things off. But the other thing that you can do is create more sections. So I like to create sections in order of what's really important to me when I get into Slack. Like if I get overwhelmed and I'm not functioning, right? I don't want to just be like whack-a-moling these channels. I need to get to like the most important stuff. So I'm going to create a section called critical initiatives. All right. And I'm going to put a few of the initiatives that I'm working on in that section. And then I'm going to create another section called, once I've looked at all the critical initiatives, maybe I'll say customer feedback. So like all the channels that are like feedback rivers, and I'll put some things there. And then maybe I'll create a section called, you know, relevant other, related teams or related initiatives, right? And maybe I'll create another section that like, let's say I ate all my vegetables. I went through all the things that are really important for me as a PM to look at. I'll create one called dopamine. So that could be like the random channel or, the workout channel or, whatever the food channel. And I'll collapse all of these, right? Already it's a little bit more manageable, but I'm actually going to order these in order of how I want to go through. So when I first log into Slack, I want to look at the top and I want to look at critical initiatives. And then I want to look at customer feedback, right? And so on like that. So this becomes, oh, there we go. This becomes a lot more manageable. If you remember what Slack looked like when we entered it versus now, it's not just that it's more collapsed and more easy to like see the big picture. It's also I know exactly, my brain. I'm just overwhelmed. I can't think. I have a step by step guide in my sidebar of how to navigate this monster of Slack.
Amazing. And how did you manage to automate it or ignore it?
Yeah. So another underrated feature of Slack is called Slack reminders. And when Slack reminders first came out, I was like, why is Slack doing this feature? Like, is it trying to be, Asana or something? And very quickly, I realized like the genius of how this like really simple feature helped me as a PM. So I'm going to look at maybe a thread. We all know what it's like to have um, a thread that maybe you write a message and then nobody responds, right? You forgot about it and you're like, oh my God, everybody was too busy and now I don't have my answer and I have a deadline. Or the opposite, where somebody promises that they're going to do something, right? And then they never follow up. And so as PMs, right, we want to be perceived and actually be the people who are like most on top of things, like this like airtight, aura of us. Um, and so one thing you can do is say, here, this is a great message where we're trying to plan a meetup here in Israel. And I'll right click on this and I'll say, hey, remind me about this. So guy said, oh, I didn't get to it. Okay, cool. So what's like a reasonable time for a guy to get to this? Let me ping him in a week, right? And I'll hit save on this reminder. So um, this is like my peace of mind for getting ghosted, which is inevitable as a PM, or for people, not following up or not answering me and so on.
All right. And did you do anything to manage the notifications, or how do you make sure that you actually get some time for deep work?
So the way to get deep work in Slack is actually zooming out of Slack and only opening this window when you, after you've done your deep work. So that's what works for me. Everybody else has like a different schedule, but it's mainly about the idea of like completely separating it out. For me personally, and my brain, I know that the moment I go into Slack, it's over for my brain. I'm in like ping pong mode, and there's no way that I'm going to sit down and do something that like requires my brain to do hard work. Um, so what I do is I do all that hard work before I ever go into Slack, and it might sound uh, like uncomfortable, right? Like to not be available during a certain amount of time, um, or it might sound like, well, am I being a bad PM by not being there in case something happens? So I've been doing this for almost a decade and I can count on one hand the number of times that there's actually been a time sensitive emergency where somebody was blocked or, somebody needed me that moment. And in those moments, the problem was still solved because I gave key people my actual phone number. And so people knew that I was available. There's just a little bit more of a barrier. So if it was actually important, nobody would hesitate to call me. But if it was like, hey, you know what? He's not answering, but like we're not actually blocked on this, people aren't going to call my phone. This works for remote companies and in office companies. Um, for example, in office companies, right? I'll just be in a different room or I'll be, around the corner in a coffee shop if we really need to focus. So it's all about how do you arrange and design your day before you even go to Slack.
Yes, and I think that, as you get really senior in those director and VP levels, there is kind of this expectation that you're available within 5 minutes, but I love your point here about the status. That's what I did when I was last VP is I would put a status in there, deep work dash call my number if you need me. And so then people kind of felt that security that, okay, he still is available. He's telling me he's doing deep work. And I noticed some people are pretty bad about turning off their statuses. I tried to be pretty good about only using that deep work status, in a kind of predictable manner, usually 2 to 3 hours early in the day, so that people knew that they could find me and they could also see when I was available versus not.
Yeah, that's a great example. And I think over time, um, especially as a leader, right, you're actually setting an example for how you want other people. Like everybody should be doing deep work. right? And ideally, if you're, let's say, a PM on a team, other people, everybody's craving deep work. So they're like, wait, I see that Akash is doing deep work every day from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. That's my opportunity to do deep work, right? He's not going to be pinging me. And I've been on teams where everybody kind of adopted it because they're like, oh, finally, we have a break.
Yeah, it's so huge. So the last sort of way to work unfairly that I think you have written about that others haven't is this idea of getting a head start on discovery with product scrapbooking. So how do people do that?
Right? One of the most valuable things that we can do is customer discovery. And yet when an initiative, right, like is decided on, that's like the thing we have the least amount of time on. Everybody wants us to do it, but they want us to like, okay, let's kick it off as soon as possible. Or let's have, let's just start like specking it out or brainstorming or testing ideas. But with like, wait, what about time to interview some users but that takes some lead up time, right? Or go through support tickets or all the things we want to do. One way to really get a head start is not to wait for that moment, um, not to wait for the moment that like an initiative is chosen, but actually to be scrapbooking kind of continuously all the time. So as PMs, we're constantly being barraged by, a nonlinear, messy way by feedback. And if you don't have a place to put it, um, we're just kind of looking at it. We're like, hey, that's a cool idea, but like, that's not on today's roadmap or this quarter's roadmap. Like, kind of slips your mind. So what I started to do, I call it scrapbooking, which means I use Notion because it's like really convenient, but there's so many, great software, pieces of software that could do this, like Google Docs or, any kind of project management, anything where you create these like distinct documents. And I start to notice that there's like a theme. Hey, YouTubers really want AI thumbnails in Riverside. And every time that I hear somebody mention that, it could be in a support ticket, um, could be on Reddit, it could be in our Facebook community, it could be, um, hey, maybe there's like some quantitative pattern where I notice people like they're always clicking on something and then they're clearly like in full story, right, or Hotjar, I see that they're like mistaking a button, right, and endless things like that. Um, for Riverside, one of the projects that I was like really monitoring is, a lot of creators have a lot of pro tips that they're sending their guests. We should really build those in. Sorry, we should really build those in to the product. But like, what would that be? That takes a lot of like lead time, right? So every time that I did a user interview, I like made sure to ask that creator, hey, what are the instructions that you send in advance? Can you send that to me? And they send that to guests anyways, and they're really happy to do that. So I started to, really save all these PDFs and Google Docs. And I saved, what are some hacks people do? And, what is the enterprise team recommending? And what are some things that, the data team already found in like some of their unrelated research? Um, yeah, and so on and so forth, could be user research interviews. So when the time finally came and this did get prioritized, I was able to make a case for leadership. First of all, it was way easier to make that case, right? It's really hard to make a case for discovery without the discovery. And I was already off to the races and I could already do a kickoff like quite soon, right? Because I had these like really vivid examples for design and engineering. And I could start to parallelize. I could keep doing discovery, but they already had like a lot of really good context to work with. And all that was done with very minimal effort, just like take a screenshot, paste it into Notion, take a link, paste it into Notion, right? Take a gong call, take a Loom, whatever it is. And these things really build up over time.
Yeah, what I found is that building a second brain like this, whether it's Notion or Apple Notes or anything like that, the real power is when you start to use the search bar, right? Because you start to find your some crazy connections also between these notes. You might have taken some notes on some other product scrapbook about another feature of, oh, this is this really important problem that this segment of creators has. There's a segment of creators, on Riverside that I think really obsessed with like 4K recordings. Maybe like those people, they're really having trouble like getting guests to use the smartphone. Then when you're working on this, all of a sudden you can search and find, okay, here's the specific learning I've gotten about this specific segment. So it's almost about creating this knowledge repository of discovery facts that you can then go ahead and use later on.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to clean. The idea is actually let it be messy. It's really easier to like sort it out and group it and, like you said, segment right around the right problem later on. So you don't have to like know in advance which specific problems you're going to be solving. You can just cluster however you feel like and figure it out later. Like you said, with the search feature, especially Notion AI is incredible for like next level search around Notion.
Are there any things people should know about using Notion AI search?
Um, I think it's still an early feature, so sometimes it like blows my mind, and sometimes I'm like, how did you not see that? I don't think it searches images very well. Um, but you can ask it something like, "Hey, what was that document where I talk about XYZ?" You know? Um, and if you were using Notion search, like the classic, you'd have to get the exact keywords right? For it to you have to kind of like do a lot of mental work and like, what did I call it at the time? But if you don't know and you're like, I know there's a lot of things across the knowledge base around this, but everybody calls it something different. You can use natural language and it'll use an LLM. That's like what we were talking about earlier, actually. It uses retrieval augmented generation, um, and it can take search to like a next level.
Awesome. So that's it for our demos and screen shares. Hopefully, that gives you guys a lot of ways to work unfairly in this unfair role that we all find ourselves in. What are you up to now? You were early PM at Patreon, Wix, I believe, DuckDuckGo, Riverside, all these amazing companies. What are you up to now, and what's next for you?
So I teach a course on Maven days called Build Your Personal PM Productivity System and AI Copilot. And I've actually started to do this full time now, and I'm giving it a shot. I'm like, what does it feel like to do this full time? And um, yeah, how do I stay sharp without, still being a PM and figuring out all sorts of like questions. What is this like new incarnation of my career as a creator?
Amazing. And you guys he is part of my Maven creation, so you can use Aakash X Maven for $100 off that course. When is the next cohort?
The next cohort is in mid-May. So it's
Okay.
coming up in 2 months.
All right. And do a lot of people get that expensed with their learning and development budget?
Yeah. A lot of PMs, what they'll be able to do is share with the manager. And Maven has like excellent templates that saves you a lot of time that have been proven. And tons of Maven students have used this to get it reimbursed. If you have a professional development budget, or even if you don't, this is like a really high ROI expense for you.
All right. And outside of Maven, what are you up to? Where can people find you online?
I post on LinkedIn and Twitter, and the things I mainly post, I realize that like the best thing I can do day to day in my like new incarnation of the full time creator is I just do like a lot of experiments with AI with my PM hat on, mainly because I realize like most PMs just don't have the time for that, and I share the results. So if something goes well, I share it. If something goes not well, I find people enjoy that or find that more valuable. So I just kind of a guinea pig for product managers out there.
All right. So if you want to be trying the AI tools but haven't been able to, definitely check out his content online. Tal, thank you so much for being here.
Gosh, thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find out about the podcast. You can find all the past episodes or learn more about the show at product-growth.com. See you in the next episode.